my honor and pleasure to be here with Rabbi Herzl Hefter, who is the founder and Rosh Beit Midrash of Beit Midrash Har El, founded in memory of Belda Kaufman Lindenbaum. And you can tap into this wonderful institution through the Torah they put out monthly or even more often. You can go to the website, look down below, and sign on for that. And if you're someone who has a lot of rich textual learning experience, and you're committed to Torah and mitzvot and to helping move our community forward, you should consider the Smicha track for serious religious men and women as well. So thanks for taking time to talk.
Thank you very much, Rav Shmuly. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So it's a delight for me. So I want to explore the theology, which is foundational to your work. I mean, you're a halachist. You teach halakha, which is a remarkable thing, that you're also so deeply embedded in Chassidut and in theology. And maybe we can start with the point of authority versus intuition. How do you think of the role of religious authority in the life of Torah and mitzvot, and how do you think of the role of our personal intuitions?
I think that's the core of that any religious person has to deal with. On the one hand, we have a model of, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Moses received the Torah at Sinai, and he passed it on. So there's this thing, this body that gets passed on, and God speaks, and we have to listen, right? That's the model of God, the commander, right? And we are commanded. That's one model, right? And it's not a model that we can leave behind. But the other model is what happened at the splitting of the sea, where people take the initiative, and there's an aspect of religious experience and joy and spontaneity. Mm-hmm. And precisely in that parsha, we have both the parsha of Yetziat Mitzrayim, we have both things happening. You have what happened at the sea, and then you have the giving of the law at Marah, mm-hmm. right? So the question is what the balance is. And at different times in history, the balance shifts in one way as opposed to the other way. And my feeling is that in the Orthodox community, the balance at this point in time is too much in the area of authority. In other words, individuals don't feel confident mm-hmm. enough. The authority expresses its opinion, and who are we to disagree? Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I think it captures something of the religious tenor of modern orthodoxy. And what happens as a consequence of that is that people who live, you could say, according to Western values of democracy and equality and compassion for all people, that they might feel alienated from the authority, but they don't know what to do. So mm-hmm. that creates mm-hmm. is sort of this dissonance, which I think religiously is very unhealthy. Yeah. So what has to happen is there has to be a shift in the direction of intuition, of healthy, refined spiritual sensibilities, which is based, and this is the important thing. It's not that the people think the Torah says this, but I feel this, so I have to sort of repress what I think. No, what you feel, if you've looked at yourself carefully, and this puts a responsibility upon individuals, they have to study, but if you've looked at yourself carefully and you understand the situation and you still feel a certain way, right, that has gravitas. And that can be brought into conversation with the authority, and the outcome might be different than it is now.
Yeah. So it seems like this is not only an issue of truth, but of religious experience, right? Because it's not just that the religious authority may have got it wrong, or that people may feel they got it wrong and feel alienated from it, but also by giving over the process of exploration and investigation, dismissing or suppressing conscious and feeling and intuition, that one may actually be distancing oneself from God.
Oh, for sure, because that's part of the price of repression, mm-hmm. right? Is it creates these neurotic symptoms, if you want to talk about it psychologically. So the neurotic symptoms could be excessive. It really becomes obsessive compulsive behavior, right? Obsessive attention to detail, mm-hmm. and you ignore the bigger picture. And that's because there's all this energy and sentiment that's getting repressed, right? So that has to be released for people in a healthy way. In a sense, I'm talking about therapy, right? But it's communal therapy, right? That we have to go through, and that comes from a place of acknowledging and understanding that we're all created in the image of God, and that's not just an empty cliche. In other words, the naive way of looking at things is that there's something out there and the authority tells me what it is, right? But that's very, very naive, because we understand today that you never really can crawl out of your skin. You only see things from inside yourself, right? So that means at the end of the day, your commitments and your experiences are happening inside of you. And that is what you've got to rely on, right? So that has to have a greater weight than what somebody else, in relationship to what other people are telling you, right?
So it seems like one might come to the conclusion that this is religious light. This is religious light. It's lowering the bar. But it seems to me what you're saying is raising the responsibility, right? It seems to me that a posek, with all the kavod, with all respect to religious authorities, may grasp the complexity of the text, and may on some level grasp who this person is asking a question. But the true complexity of the human experience and how to apply deep religious and halachic problems to one's life means that the complexity is greatened when one takes personal responsibility. Would you say so?
Yes, for sure. And there are poskim that understand that. For example, we talked about this before. Rav Michael Tikachinsky, who is the author of Gesher HaChaim, which is one of the foundational books on the laws of mourning. So he has a section of articles, and he talks about laws of inheritance. And of course, according to Torah law, the firstborn male gets a double portion, and women, daughters, are entirely excluded if there are brothers, right? Which, of course, most people don't do today, and there are halachic mechanisms getting around it. It belongs to a different era, those type of laws. And he was in the Eidach HaRedis in Yerushalayim, but he wrote very powerfully for advocating for a negation of those Torah laws, and that people should not use those Torah laws as a guide for inheritance. He even tells a story of someone who was a big a sage, a Talmid Chacham, who insisted that after he died, the inheritance should go according to Torah law. And he tells the story that the oldest son was actually not so honest, and he didn't really deserve more, and the younger son was actually a great scholar, and there was a sister, and she was excluded. He said the family was torn apart, and he said it was a disgrace for the memory of this person. And he uses it as an example where we can't follow the Torah law. Now, where did Rav Tikuchinsky get that from? Right? What text was he basing himself on? He was the text, right? We are the text, right? That's what I think people have to understand. We ultimately only interpret ourselves, and that's what he was using. So he was bringing himself. It's as if he had a Gemara, he had a Rashi, he had a Tosfot, he had a Rambam, and then he had himself, right? And he was square, just like when we learn, we try to square the different sources to make sense out of them. What goes into that chulent of sources, right, is yourself, as the meat, not the potatoes. Excuse me, I know you're veggie.
That's all good.
The soy meat.
So what do we do? What do we do about? Is the fact that we have agendas a problem? The fact that we've intellectually wade through issues and we've come to conclusions that there are moral priorities that we should emphasize today, and we want to see those play out. What do we do with the fact that we have these agendas?
Yeah, I think that, again, there's a naivete that to think that there's a pure halacha, and what we have to do is, and when we study the halacha, we come to some sort of pure Platonic truth, right? I think epistemologically, and it was how we know things, it's extremely naive. Everyone has agendas.
That's right.
The question is, though, first of all, some people have unconscious agendas. And perhaps 100 years ago, 50 years ago, people were under the impression that they were just dealing with texts and interpreting them, and they weren't aware that they had agendas. So that's sort of an innocence, right? But we live in a time where that innocence is lost. We're aware that we have agendas. We can't be naive, right? So then I think the best way to go, the only truthful and authentic way to go, is to acknowledge, yes, I have an agenda, right? Now, let me take that and put that agenda on the table and look at it, right? And bring that into conversation with what I'm understanding from the sources. That has to do with bringing me to the table. right?
Right.
So me is my agenda. And to say that there's something that's not agenda driven,
Right.
it is agenda driven,
Right.
and it's worse because it's not honest.
Right. And it seems, since Kant, we've understood, as you just said, that all objective data passes through the subjectivity of the human mind.
Correct.
And to pretend as if there was no filter there is kind of absurd. And it feels, but this agenda, it seems like, is part of the religious project to shape the agenda religiously,
Right.
as a God-filled project, as an ethics-filled project.
Right.
So I wonder, are we moving? Are you arguing for something that's returning to a prior era? Are you arguing for something progressive? Is this idea of re-emphasizing a personal religious intuition more today than religious authority? Is this something new ultimately that you think we're in a new era, or are you trying to get us back to something we've lost?
Yes. I think that if you look back into tradition, there are seeds of one. There are intuitional seeds, and there are you could call them metaphysical seeds, where there are things out there, and the way we look at things, and we think we're grasping reality. But there's also subjective seeds, and every era sort of, it's like when you put your mouse over something, and the letters that the mouse is on, like they come out, like they emerge. Yeah. So every era has what emerges and what stands out. Yeah. Right. So you have in the Torah, Karov Bilvavcha Lasoto, it's close to your heart. So there's an interiority that's already alluded to in the Torah. But most of the Torah, as it's commonly understood, is God says, and you're supposed to do. It's like Havdil, like Yul Brenner, so it shall be written, so it shall be done in the Ten Commandments, right? That's sort of authority that speaks. But Midrashim and later Kabbalah preserved a different image of God in relationship to the Torah, a more organic model, where God doesn't command and you have to perform, but the Torah emerges through people. This is not something new, right? Yeah. But it's particularly relevant, or it's particularly what's the word? It's particularly relevant today. For the last few hundred years, the whole modernist turn, which began with Descartes, everybody was talking about like what's out there, and Descartes just said, 1 second, how do I know anything? Right. How do I know? It's all in me, right? Yeah. So from then on, there's a pronounced inward turn, right, where we experience ourselves as human beings as being inward beings, right? There's me inside and there's the world outside. That whole experience, I don't think people didn't experience themselves as human beings that way in the past. But that's not today. That's a few hundred years. That's right. And this is the culmination of that, which if it happened in philosophy, and it also happened in the move from medieval Jewish philosophy to Kabbalah to Chassidut, and this is a almost a universal move. Yeah.
So we know descriptively that this exists, but to move prescriptively to the weight of human subjectivity, how would you root halachically or theologically, religiously, the weight of the value of the human subjective experience?
That's a very difficult question, because it's sort of a subjective determination, right? It's like it's trying to talk about what are the rules for no rules, right? I think that when there's enough people that feel a certain way, so that it's not just me, right? That if it's me, so it's merely subjective, right? But if you feel this way, and there are other people in the group that feel this way, and then it becomes a question of how you define the group that you're dealing with, right? But if there's a general sentiment, and I would add that emerges from 500 years of Western civilization, and it's been in the East even before then, right? Then that carries weight. Right.
So what do we do when there's a clash? So how do we navigate when we experience a clash between what religious authority or groups of religious authorities are saying and what we know so deeply or feel so deeply to be the opposite?
Right. So that also is a complicated question, because every case is unique. Because the question is, what type of halachic wall are you coming up against? And what level of internal certainty clarity do you have or you demand? It's like in law. In laws of evidence, if you're dealing with a capital crime where there might be a death penalty, you require a certain level of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with a civil case, you have different levels of evidence. And in halakha, it's also like that, right? Dinei nefashot requires certain judicial process. Dinei mamonot requires a different judicial process. There are different layers of severity. So when you're talking about a conflict between, and there are conflicts, right, between my sentiment and my strongly held intuitions and some halakha, right? So the question is, what is the halakha and what are my sentiments, right? And if the halakha is something more severe, so then it can't be just me, right? When I gave, and if it's less severe, maybe it can just be me, right? I believe that Masorah, for example, is an extremely important consideration. Extremely important. I think in the OU's decision of what they wrote about women getting smicha, I actually think they were correct in framing it in terms of Masorah. It's not a halachic issue. But then you have to say, okay, let's say this is the way things have been done for a long time, but as opposed to that, you have like basically a basic human rights issue, right? So that's one type of question, right? So that's why I didn't do it myself.
Right. Okay. So maybe we'll close on this issue then. How did you decide to be one of the only rabbis within Orthodoxy to be ordaining women? Yeah.
Well, I felt that way for a long time.
Yeah.
It came to me almost by chance because there was a group of people that I was teaching Yeridea to, and two of the women asked me if I would give them smicha as well. Yeah. So I couldn't see any justification for saying no, so I thought about it for about a nanosecond, and I said I would do it, but I wouldn't do it alone.
Right.
So I spoke to Rabbi Daniel Sperber, who agreed to grant the smicha together with me, and I knew that there were other people that supported it as well. So given the balance there, right? So I didn't do it myself, and I wouldn't have done something like that myself, because it is a sort of a public policy consideration. It does have ramifications. But that's that's an example. That's how I worked it out. And I think that a person has to analyze themselves, and they also have to look for collaborators, not with the negative side, not without the negative connotation of collaborators. They look for collaboration, right? Because it's like the Lord of the Rings. Like nobody can do it by themselves, right? You need a fellowship. Yeah. Right, and I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. So so I think that has to be the guide. And again, if you talk about things which are halachically very severe, then that's why you need 100 rabbanim, right? If you talk about things which are less severe, but they might have important public policy implications, it's a question of judgment. Yeah. It really comes down to a question of judgment. Right.
Okay. Any last bit you want to, last puzzle piece you want to put in here?
Yeah, I think the basis of all this, Rav Tzadok Akomi Lublin, great Hasidic master, often quotes the Zohar, or the Tikkunei Zohar, that says that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, which is comparable to the 600,000 Jews who left Egypt. And what does it mean that a person is a letter in the Sefer Torah? Right? A letter in the Sefer Torah is a piece of divine revelation. Right? And to understand that literally, that when a person refines themselves, that's what makes the Torah alive, right? And when a person realizes that they can become a piece of the Word of God, that on the one hand is an awesome responsibility, and on the other hand, when you feel that inside of you, you must bring it out, right? So that's, I'm trying to inspire myself with that, and I try to inspire
Well, you've inspired me and so many to this notion that we are to be empowered to take this responsibility to cultivate our inner worlds, this religious experience of coming closer to God, and that this has major ramifications for the Word of God in the world.
That's right.
Seems so deeply right to me, and also so terrifying because I realize how much work I have to do to get there. But I couldn't imagine a more holy and exciting enterprise of what it means to be a religious Jew today.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.